What is up, Canada? Welcome to another episode of the Maple Pill. As always, I'm your host, Matt McKeever. Oh, I look a little off-center. Let me shimmy here. Hopefully, you guys are having a good Tuesday night so far, and I've got a lot of different stories to catch up on. We're obviously going to be chatting a little bit more about what's going on with the Emergencies Act here in Canada. We'll also give you an update in regards to what's going on with the trucker convoy and protests. And then finally, there's actually just a lot to catch up on. We're going to touch upon Prince Andrew and his recent settlement. And let's really just jump into it. So I'm going to pull up my screen share here. As always, links in the video description down below to all the stories we're going to cover. I don't want this to be the end of your information seeking journey. I really do just want this to be the jumping off point. So first things first, let's talk about the trucker convoy. So as always, I've got a link to the True North recap article. So this is recap of day 23 of the Truckers for Freedom convoy. Really encourage you guys to go support True North as well. They're just one of the best daily updates in regards to what's going on. But let's keep rolling. And so first thing I wanted to cover here was, and you guys probably saw me share it on some of my social media stories earlier, but CBC and CTV News are really going after everyone that was doxxed in the recent Give, Send, Go hack. And so I just wanted to highlight how frustrating I think it is the way they're approaching essentially reporting or the journalism in regards to what's going on with the different donors. So I want to highlight this specific article. So like a New Brunswick business owner says he donated $75,000 to the Freedom Convoy, which, let's just be straight up here right off the bat, that should 100% be his ability to do so. And at the same time, if he wanted to be anonymous, I don't know if I think it's appropriate that CBC is doxing him to the extent that they are in this article. And I encourage you guys, go read the entire article. And if you think that this business owner that was just putting his money where his mouth was and supporting individual freedom, individual sovereignty, and all that, if you think that he did nothing wrong, I think you should go and show him some love, because I have no doubt he's going to be the subject of all sorts of attacks. His business will likely be attacked as well. Again, this is, maybe I'm just too black-pilled on this subject matter, but I don't believe the reason the CBC does an article like this is literally just to discuss, why a business owner might want to support the trucker convoy. I think they do this in the hopes that he'll be penalized in the market of free ideas, right? Or that he'll be, bullied by pro-mandate protesters. So just wanted to highlight here first. So they essentially asked for a statement from him, and he provided a written statement Monday afternoon. His name's Brad Howard. And so essentially he said he actually went there personally over the weekend to go see what the protests were all about. And he said, to see love, peace, and unity that many of us have longed for a long time. It was an experience of a lifetime, he wrote. I've actually heard that from multiple individuals as well, that, it was their proudest moment to be a Canadian. They felt more connected to Canada than they ever had before. He stated, "This will go down in the history books of our nation." I 100% agree with that sentiment. In fact, the protest, and so this is CBC's narrative now, in fact, the protest has forced businesses to close and violate several laws. So again, it's just, the partisanship here is so obvious. And honestly, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are in regards to the CBC. I'm ready to fully defund it. I've been ready to fully defund it for a while. And honestly, I think that when in doubt, journalism, when in doubt, newspapers, and just media in general should really be looking on the side of the individual or the small party, rather than immediately just, towing the line of the regime or the administration or Justin Trudeau. And so to focus on, in fact, the protest has forced many downtown businesses to close. One, they didn't cause them to close permanently. Unlike we saw, the small business bankruptcy rate hit a new all-time high last quarter, right? I covered that in a previous story last week. As well, we also heard from multiple businesses that, in fact, they had some of the best business that they've ever had. The businesses that were forced to close, they weren't actually forced to close. What happened was the government said it may be in your best interest to close, and a lot of businesses decided to proactively close. Now, again, if they were going to be very heavy on forcing masks and QR passcodes and stuff like that, who knows? Maybe they would have got flack from protesters. But honestly, I didn't see a lot of reporting breaking down exactly why these businesses were forced to close. And in fact, it seems like there was a relatively strong police presence throughout this entire protest. So again, this just feels disingenuous to me. And to violate several laws, yes and no. right? Like, yes, obviously there are laws that are being, like whether it's bylaws or laws that are being violated in regards to these protests, right? Because, if you didn't have a permit to shut down streets and things of that nature, of course. But at the same time, is it really that different than any other sort of protest, right? We don't see CBC going after and trying to dox anyone that supported any of the other protests that we've seen over the last 2 years, right? Or any other protest literally in the history of protesting in Canada, to the best of my knowledge. And so it's fascinating to see them hone in on something like this. Then what I want to highlight here is essentially how they're trying to characterize this individual, and it's obvious that they're trying to go after him. He called truckers salt of the earth people with the biggest hearts and said the convoy is a rare opportunity to thank them. We are thankful to be blessed enough to support their efforts to do what they have to do in a peaceful way until the government removes the mandates to restore our freedom as pre-COVID, he said. And then they go into records from the federal government show that Easy Clean has received funding from the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy Program set up to help employers who have seen a drop in revenue during the COVID-19 pandemic. It's not clear how much the company received, but when asked about the subsidy, Howland said it was spent on wages at the beginning of the pandemic in 2020. Literally what it was supposed to be used for, right? So again, I think it's really important to understand when the government taxes you and takes your money away from you, when there's an opportunity for you to get some of that money back and it's within the legal framework of the rules they've set, there's nothing wrong with that, right? And like I could go on a tangent here because I used to kind of flip-flop on that and be like, no, I don't want any of their money, But as a small business owner, if he was looking down the barrel of having his business shut down, or he was just simply experiencing lower revenue than he otherwise would have because of the government forcing his business to react to the environment they created with their mandates, rules, and lockdowns. Again, that was the government forcing. Unlike the CBC's narrative of businesses in Ottawa were forced to close. I don't think that that's honestly a apples to apples comparison. I would argue the government forcing these businesses into a new economic paradigm over the last 2 years is much more forceful than having a bunch of protesters in downtown Ottawa that still need to buy goods and services, right? And so the final point here I've highlighted, Howland has also donated thousands of dollars to the provincial Progressive Conservatives and the federal Conservative Party since 2018, according to public records. Again, it's just fascinating because I think they're trying to paint this narrative that, one, well, if his business was in trouble, how would he have $75,000 to donate to the convoy? If it's from his personal funds, I don't see any issue with that whatsoever either. Again, even if it was the business funds, again, as long as he was within the framework the government originally set out when they implemented those rules in order to try and help the small businesses that they were really curb stomping. Because again, remember, not all businesses were treated equally during these lockdowns. In fact, we've continued to see companies like Amazon and big box stores post all-time revenue highs, while small businesses are posting all-time highs of going out of bankruptcy filings. Then they talked about some of his distrust of vaccines. Again, honestly, if these quotes are the most damaging quotes they could find of him or of his on social media, I really don't think that they're painting the evil picture that they believe they are. I've got no doubt that your average CBC reader probably is jumping to conclusions on all this and foaming at the mouth. Again, that's why I think it's important that if you guys go read this and you don't think he did anything wrong, go show him some love, because I have no doubt he's right now being tarred and feathered in the court of public opinion during these high stakes, very divisive moments in Canada's history. Next, I want to highlight an article from Maclean's here. The Emergencies Act, what's seriously endangered? Paul Wells, 5 PMs have had Emergencies Act and declined to use it. The question now is whether Trudeau has met stringent tests laid out 34 years ago. So again, it's just a decent article kind of laying out more about the Emergencies Act. We already covered a decent amount of that yesterday. So again, link in the video description down below if you guys want to check it out. This is from Canoe Now. And so this was courtesy of the Canadian Press. Normalizing emergency legislation threatens democracy's civil liberties, CCLA states. And so it's nice to finally see the CCLA come out and make some sort of statement on this. But again, they've been very quiet throughout the entire trucker protest, which I think is honestly unfortunate for all Canadians involved. Again, because I'm forgetting off the top what CC. Yeah, so it's the Canadian Civil Liberties Association. So again, they should have been very vocal, in my opinion, throughout this entire pandemic. And at least they're finally stating that once the Emergencies Act was implemented, that it threatens our democracy, which it absolutely does do. Now, this is from CBC News. So Peter Slowly resigns as Ottawa police chief, says force now better positioned to end this occupation. Again, while just in general, I'm never going to be a fan of a lot of law enforcement, because I think a lot of laws that are enforced could easily just be done through, voluntary mutual contracts and arbitration, things of that nature. I don't think that he deserves the criticism that he received throughout this entire protest. I think he was put in a very difficult position. And you guys heard me talk about this the first week of the trucker protest. I was wildly impressed with how unbiased it felt like the Ottawa police were, right? When you looked at their tweets, they were really just focused on the facts and trying to de-escalate the situation. Meanwhile, every politician around him was trying to escalate things, trying to make it more divisive, trying to demonize the protesters. And it honestly seemed like that first week. Now, again, it seemed like after the first week, maybe there was a change in policy, or maybe it was a change in employees who was handling the Twitter account. It definitely took a different turn then. But yeah, again, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. I feel like he's probably also going to be tarred and feathered in the court of public opinion. And I don't believe he necessarily deserves that. But again, I'd love to hear your thoughts, your opinions. You guys were boots on the ground. What were your experiences with the Ottawa police over the last couple of weeks of protests? Now, this is from Rebel News. Debunked what happened in the attempted arson of a residential building in Ottawa. So when I originally saw this headline, I'm not going to lie, I've been very suspicious of this story throughout. So I was like, good, they must have finally a smoking gun in order to say that this definitely wasn't trucker related or protester related. They don't have a smoking gun in here. I think they do some solid reporting, and it seems to be more reporting than any of the mainstream media did in regards to what went down. But it seems like honestly, the jury's still out on this. So I think this headline's maybe a little bit of a jump to conclusion, but it really is mainly just a counterbalance to the jump to conclusion that the mainstream media did when they originally saw the tweet thread. And it does sound like people, at least the way Rebel News framed this, it does sound like investigators are less certain that there was really a serious attempted arson here. But again, I encourage you to go watch the video, because in addition to the write-up here, the video has a phone call of them calling in to the Ottawa Police Department and then talking to the arson unit as well. So if you guys want to get more information on that, again, if this was a hoax or this was a real attempted arson, either way, we should get to the bottom of that, and the people involved should be punished. Because if this was a hoax, if this was like a false flag operation, they were clearly trying to escalate the situation in Ottawa. And if this turns out that it was trucker protesters, and for some ridiculous reason they were trying to burn down an apartment building of just residents, obviously that's very wrong as well. But again, I got a feeling this is just going to kind of disappear into a nothing burger, which is frustrating for everyone involved, because there's no wrap up there, right? Now, this is from CTV News. So we're switching in now to our blue pill. So that kind of does us for the Emergency Act update and the trucker convoy. I'm still going to have a couple other stories throughout the show where we'll kind of touch upon it. But Canada plans to welcome more than 1.3 million immigrants by end of 2024. Now, again, when we talk about immigration, it's a complicated issue. You guys kind of know me. I'm mainly an anarchist, libertarian, a minarchist, whatever you kind of want to frame that as. Because again, it really does. The devil's in the details here. In a perfect world, I would love to just see wide open borders, but we need to understand when we start having a social safety net, when we've got a social state, you can't just have wide open borders, right? Because there's consequences and costs to that, and unintended consequences related to the policies involved around that. So jumping into this, Federal Immigration Minister Sean Fraser said in his newly released plan that Canada will admit 431,645 permanent residents in 2022, 447,000 next year, and 451,000 in 2024. The federal government says it wants to boost its newcomer admissions rate to just over 1% of Canada's population by 2024. Now, again, it's kind of a complicated issue here. Having 1% per year of your population come in as immigrants, that definitely will change characteristics, right? Understand that most immigrants do move to large metro areas at the start. Oftentimes, at least when you read opinion pieces, people are of the opinion that a lot of, new immigrants to a country, they naturally feel indebted to the individuals that passed the immigration policy that let them join a country. Here's a direct quote. If we want to be able to sustain our healthcare system, our public education system, the social services and benefits that are provided by different levels of government, we're going to need more workers and young families to come here, Fraser said in an interview. And so, yeah, definitely when you look at, when you kind of look at what's going on from, population trends, we're not really keeping up with replacement here in Canada. So having the immigrants is definitely a key component to us being able to have a more stable society in regards to being able to finance all the social programs we have. And, you see this in some of particularly the Scandinavian countries and Northern European countries where they're dropping below replacement. I think that's also the case in Japan, but you guys will have to fact check me on that. So again, if you want to understand more what's going on, I encourage you to do so. The one thing I will mention here that we're going to cover in a future story tonight is this definitely has huge impacts in regards to what goes on with housing, right? We're already in the middle of a housing crisis. You guys know me. I really believe it's all due to terrible monetary policy or loose monetary policy or fiat monetary policy. They're all really the same thing. Now, this is from Global News. Gassy Jack statue in Vancouver's Gastown toppled during Women's Memorial March video shows. So straight up, never heard of Gassy Jack until today when I was kind of doing my rounds, checking what was going on in the mainstream media. It doesn't sound like he was that good of a fellow. He married a 12-year-old when he was 40-year-old. She ran away when she had her first baby with him at age 15. So again, this isn't a hill that I want to die on, but I do think that it's worth noting essentially how these headlines are framed. Understand they're throwing paint on him. They literally teared down the statue. And there's more to the story. The city was already in negotiations with an indigenous community, essentially figuring out what's the best way to remove this statue and essentially create general awareness around how, despite the fact that maybe he did found Vancouver, that he definitely had a checkered past at a minimum and probably was actually just a bad person. I think that what concerns me is twofold here. One is literally how this is being framed versus when we look back on what happened with the trucker protesters in regards to the war memorial where a lady was dancing on it. Again, is that distasteful? Absolutely. But to call that a desecration and then to essentially just kind of talk about this as, they toppled it during Women's Memorial March, I just feel like this is being framed very differently. The second thing here is we're never going to find perfect individuals in our past, right? And I don't think that there's perfect individuals in our present either. So we as a society are going to have to come to some sort of conclusion here, right? Or some sort of compromise. Either the conclusion is going to be that, hey, listen, we're never going to put anyone on a pedestal. All humans are imperfect. So we're just never going to talk about history because it's filled with checkered past and imperfect individuals. Or we're going to need to come to a compromise where we can both recognize that no one's perfect and say like, hey, this guy did, I'm not using Gassy Jack here as an example, but like, let's talk about someone like John A. MacDonald, right? Like, hey, this guy did some good things for our country, but he was also bad. He also had bad opinions. He also did things that we would find very distasteful in the present, right? I can't help but kind of feel like this is like iconoclasm, right? That they talk about where essentially we're literally just tearing down all of our history without really a clear plan on how to move forward. But again, that's my hot take on it. You guys let me know. What's your opinion on Gassy Jack, particularly if you're from BC or Vancouver? Because like I said, never heard from him or about him until today and really just read about him a couple times in the mainstream press here. Now, what I wanted to highlight, this is from the National Post. The world's done with it, so let's just move forward, says Ford, as Ontario COVID restrictions set to ease. The government intends to fully lift capacity limits on businesses and social gatherings on March 1st. So if you guys want to read the article, link in the video description down below. But let's actually just jump over, and we're kind of jumping into the middle of the Q&A period here. But I just want to highlight a couple of his responses, and then we'll riff on my opinions in regards to his responses.
Holly McKenzie with Canadian Press. Just following up on the Emergencies Act question, I guess we want to know specifically what actions you want to see happen here, how you see it playing out, and politically, I guess, if you could elaborate on your support for the measure.
Yeah, I'll start off with a political question. I don't care about the politics. I care about making sure we have a vibrant area to do business in. That's the number one priority. And whatever it takes to give the police.
All right. Well,
the tools to go in there and get these people moving on. Guys, I get it. Everyone's frustrated. I'm just as frustrated as anyone else. We want to get through this. I want to get these mandates moving. We made some great announcements yesterday. In 2 days, we're going to be going to 100% in restaurants. On March the 1st, we're just going to open things up. And thank God, and no secret that with these passports, vax passports, I wasn't sold on them, but went along and we did what we had to do because the doctor said we need to do this.
So like right there, I'm going to take a point here where this is so frustrating to me to hear him now just scapegoating, right, the people that he's taken advice from. No, the reason we elected you as the leader and we don't just let unelected officials dictate what goes on in our province or our country here in Canada is because, we kind of want a semblance of a democracy here. And while, again, it's great that you're taking their opinions, if you're not convinced of what they're telling you, you shouldn't just be blindly implementing it. So again, I find this wild. It doesn't surprise me that this is the approach that Doug Ford's taking, but it's wild that he's willing to be so transparent in it. And I suspect, again, he's trying to leave an olive branch or a back door open to what, at least in the mainstream media, will call his base, which is a lot of the truckers and protesters that are very frustrated. And they never agreed with vaccine passports. And the idea that you just went along with it just because, these are people's lives. These are people's businesses. These are people's futures here. There's serious consequences to every decision you make. But when we talk about locking down a country or a province for 2 years, that's not something you should just flippantly do because one person told you, even though you didn't really believe in it, right? And don't get me wrong, Doug Ford's not going to be the only individual that's going to try and whitewash history here, that's going to try and, point to others who are at fault or explain that they didn't understand the facts or that, just a new study came out and now we understand what's going on. No, this information's been available for an extended period of time. If you don't agree with it, get rid of it immediately. Today, what's the difference going to be 2 weeks from now? Again, we're literally just I'm going to keep myself from getting banned here on social media. We're literally just governed by kids that are trying to be the popular kids. And so they're just reacting to the pollsters. And the pollsters may or may not have their own narratives or their own end goals in regards to what's going on, right? I understand the mainstream media, they get a lot more attention and a lot more business, right? A lot more advertising revenue. They also get all kinds of subsidies and bailouts these days, particularly because of the COVID mandates and even government advertising for vaccines and, when clinics are and all that shit. But understand that these aren't adults that are actually governing us. They're just like robots that just regurgitate whatever someone else pushes in front of them, and they never want to take responsibility. How often have you heard a politician actually say, look, I got it wrong and I'm going to fix it immediately, rather than trying to pass the buck?
So now moving forward, the doc says hang in there for the mask. I respect him. Dr. Moore is phenomenal, but something, he's reasonable too. He's reasonable. He gets it. He understands the economy, and I think he's done an incredible job. But thank God on March the 1st, we're moving forward out of this, and man, I just can't wait. Really can't wait.
So can you or Dr. Moore break down for us exactly what's changed, right? What threshold have we hit now that allows us to open up that doesn't allow us to open up today, right? Or what threshold are you predicting? And the answer is there's nothing, right? It's all just smoke and mirrors. It's all just policy based upon polls and trying to go along to get along. And we've seen how well that served us so far. So again, link in the video description down below. I encourage you to watch the whole video, but I did want to highlight this one other aspect of his interview as well.
You can go to Costco, you can go to Walmart, you can go shopping. You don't know if the person has a shot beside you or not, but we also know that it doesn't matter if you have 1 shot or 10 shots, you can catch COVID. See, the Prime Minister has triple shots, and I know hundreds of people with 3 shots that caught COVID. We just have to be careful. We've got to always make sure we wash our hands and move forward. But Colin, we can't stay in this position forever. We got to learn to live with this and get on with our lives. I bet if I asked every single person in this room, do you want these damn masks or do you want them off? They want them off. They want to get back to normal. They want to be able to go for dinner with their families. And there's every single person, including myself, knows people that are unvaccinated. Sure, there's the rebel rousers, and then there's just hardworking people that just don't believe in it. And that's their choice. This is about, again, a democracy and freedoms and liberties.
and this is going to be me getting a little black-pilled here, but I have zero belief that Doug Ford or any other politician in Canada, other than, again, those couple good politicians I shared yesterday, or at least the best of the worst, they wouldn't be acting this way whatsoever if they didn't receive serious pushback, if they didn't believe that this was more than a fringe minority that's fed up. And the one thing I just want to really impress upon you guys is we've always been mainly free throughout this pandemic. You've always had a choice. You could actually go into a store and not wear a mask. Would you receive some social judgment? Yeah. Would maybe some person have the balls to make a snide comment? Potentially. Now, again, when I go in being, 6 feet, having a big beard and stuff, no one's going to say shit to me. So maybe I've got a little bit of an extra bonus in regards to standing up for my rights and freedoms. But understand, do you want this guy actually deciding when you're free and when you're not free? If the answer is not a resounding no, just understand we exist on two different planes of existence. Again, link in the video description down below to everything we're covering. Now, this is from Routers. Pandemic exodus of Canadian families from cities could fuel wage inflation. And this could have easily just been put under the clown pill for me, because literally we're just watching the mainstream media and politicians, other than Pierre Poilievre, do everything they can do to explain away inflation without stating its real cost. Its real cause, which is fiat monetary policy, right? Which is printing press or goes burr. And it's just wild. And so essentially, again, link in the video description down below if you want to read this. But the thesis here is simply this. People are deciding to leave the big cities because it's too expensive. And so because it's too expensive in the big cities, big city businesses have to pay more for their staff. And that causes inflation. And why is all this happening? Why is it so expensive in those big cities? Does it have something to do with your monetary policy? Yeah, I think it does. So let's keep rolling here. Now we're going to get into a couple of red pills. So this is from Canada News Media. We need to define what a pandemic becomes endemic, The Hill. So, yep. But at the same time, understand we're now 2 years deep into this quagmire, and now we're starting to see the mainstream media be like, hey, you know what? I've got an idea. Maybe we should set them thresholds, or actually have even an inkling or a mild understanding about how to approach, opening things up again. Maybe we should actually use real numbers, right? And data in order to make our decisions, rather than just gut feelings from administrators. Governors and public health officials are split over whether COVID-19 pandemic is reaching the endemic phase nearly 2 years after much of the nation was first locked down. Others say there's debate over the very definition of the endemic, especially as it applied to the coronavirus. So one, it was always endemic, or spoiler alert maybe there for those of you that don't understand the definition of it. So we were never going to get to COVID zero, right? The moment it was on every continent, nope, this was always going to be the flu. Those of us that have been paying attention even mildly to the real science, we've known this for an extended period of time. And COVID zero strategies now are literally nothing more than tyrants doing tyrant things. So again, if you guys want to hear a little bit more about the debate about what does it mean to be endemic, right? And so again, they're trying to back the individuals. They're like, hey, we've known this was going to be endemic for a while. And they're like, you're using the word endemic as in it's safe or it's mild or it's this or that. No, endemic is in this shit's not going to go away. We're going to have to learn to live with it. And I'm not going to learn to live with wearing a mask for the rest of my life. I'm not going to learn to live with having to show a QR code or show my passports in order to go into a restaurant for the rest of my life. Not happening. I'm not opting into your social credit card or your social credit system, regardless of what you want. No, I don't care. You can immediately mark me as a 0 on your social credit score, because I've got no issue in participating in your clown society. Now, this is from the Globe and Mail. Chaotic frenzy rips through Canada's housing market as prices hit a fresh high in January. So again, real estate simply goes up. It is literally number go up economics here in Canada these days. Canadian home prices hit a fresh high in January, with price acceleration kicking into high gear as frenzied buyers race to buy properties and the number of new listings dropped. So again, we've still got the exact same supply shortage that we've had throughout the last, 14, 16 months, right? We actually had a little bit of supply back, I think, from March until May of 2020, when everyone was like, is this the end of the world? I'm trying to figure out what's going on. But since then, literally real estate's been on a tear in Canada, and there's really no sign that it's going to change. Now, again, I'm starting to hear more and more people talking about is there some sort of upper threshold, right? Like Canadians' affordability can only go so high. Your T4 only shows so much income in order to qualify. I think that we're going to continue to see pressure on this for the foreseeable future. Unless we're actually going to fix our monetary policies, we can talk about trying to create additional supply. You can complain about how immigrants are going to drive up real estate prices further as well. But none of all that is playing second fiddle to the actual monetary policy that's driving all this. And so, again, maybe in a white-pilled moment, I'll say Pierre Poilievre could actually be one of the guys that would apply pressure to the central banks, to the Bank of Canada in order to try and change things. But again, I think that our economy is too addicted to cheap debt. I don't think we're willing to go through the austerity necessary to actually get back to fundamentals in our economy. And that should be concerning because we can only, at this point in time, we're the Wile E. Coyote that ran off a cliff. And right now, literally our politicians, our bankers, and most of society is just like, what if we just never look down? No, at some point in time, we're going to realize there's nothing underneath us, and there's going to be pain involved. It's going to be, I don't know, hyperinflation. It's going to be stagflation. It's going to be a depression, but there will be consequences to this. Or I just literally don't understand anything. One of those two options. Now, I want to highlight this from the Toronto Sun. I did find this interesting because I didn't hear or see really any coverage of this. The Battle of Billings Bridge, how a neighborhood trapped Ottawa convoy for hours. So essentially, there was a group of individuals coming to join the convoy, and they got trapped on a bridge by counter-protesters. And just one thing I want to bring up immediately is, there's signs like Nazis, truck, fuck off, and stuff like that. And I think that I saw other photos that showed a swastika, and understand that when we saw that sort of imagery on Canadian flags during the trucker protest, that was immediately used as a justification and explanation that, yeah, these are all white supremacists. Whereas in this situation, the average person and mainstream media is willing to give the benefit of the doubt and be like, oh, just because you put the word Nazi or you use their imagery doesn't necessarily mean that you're actually saying that you support that. It could literally mean that you're saying that your opponents, your enemies are like that, right? And in my humble opinion, the vast majority, other than maybe the one dude that literally seemed to have a Nazi flag there, that maybe he was a false flag guy, maybe he was legitimately there, maybe he was trying to co-opt what was going on. But outside of that, when you see the swastika on the Canadian flag, that to me is simply saying that, hey, we think that Justin Trudeau, his administration, is actually fascist in nature, right? That we're headed down a slippery slope. That maybe someday he's going to employ martial law. Oh, wait. Actually, yeah, I guess he did kind of do that with the Emergencies Act, didn't he? Now, this is from Rebel News. British Tory leader warns woke psychodrama causing erosion of Western society. Describing wokeness as a dangerous form of decadence, Dowden cited the rise of cancel culture, wokeness, and other forms of narcissistic self-indulgence as symptoms of the Western decay. And, if you guys have been exposed to the concept or the theory of the fourth turning, right, or the phrase that, hard times create strong men create good times create weak men create hard times. Yeah, this completely lines up. You can look at the decadence that Rome had, right? Now, again, understand decadence can last for a while in empires before they end up actually completely crumbling or self-destroying themselves. There's also, was it Universe 72, I think it was called, the mice study, right? Where they gave essentially a colony of mice all the food and resources they could ever want. And they literally saw those mice. One segment of them turned into the beautiful ones. They stopped breeding and just grooming themselves, started engaging in homosexual activities and all kinds of other things that when people look back on Roman times or other times in history, they might frame as being decadent behavior. And I think that this is worth a read if you guys are interested in understanding that a bit more. I think looking into, I hope it's Universe 72, or if not, just type in mice, the beautiful ones, and I'm sure you'll find it, as well as, study up on your Roman history. But direct quote here from the British Tory. So, but whenever they are found, they pursue a common policy, the inimical of freedom. In their analysis, free speech is not a fundamental right necessary for the discovery of truth, he added. To them, it is a dangerous weapon that should be curtailed to prevent harm. Free speech is hate speech is one of their more bizarre slogans, which again feels very 1984-esque, where, freedom is slavery. Each of us is accorded a level of privilege that has nothing to do with our own personal struggles, but is based on our membership of a particular group, he added. When our attention should be focused on external foes, we seem to have entered this period of extreme introspection and self-criticism, said Dowden elsewhere in his remarks, adding that the West has become obsessed by what divides us rather than what unites us. Completely agree. And again, I think it's worth reading the entire article if you guys are interested. We're going to keep rolling here. So this is from Blacklock's Impact of 1% Tax Unknown. And I think it's important for those of you that are looking to buy real estate outside of Canada, understand that right now this doesn't impact you, but we could easily see other governments and other administrations start implementing policies to penalize Canadians because Canada's government is essentially penalizing non-foreign owners. So the Department of Finance yesterday said it is unsure of the impact of a first-time federal equity tax on foreign non-resident buyers in real estate. The tax to take effect this year would punish scoffles with $5,000 fines and surcharges. So diving a little bit deeper into it, Bill C-8, an omnibus budget bill, includes an underused housing tax act that levies a 1% annual charge on the assessed value of vacant or underused residential property owned by non-resident foreigners. The tax exempts property held by publicly traded corporations. And first of all, how cute is that, right? We're only going after small foreigners because the big foreign corporate owners, well, they might actually put up a stink and push back. It is estimated the tax will raise $735 million in revenue over the next 5 years. A direct quote here from McLean. Have you really thought about how it impacts our trade agreements with other jurisdictions, such as the United States, where I should point out Canadians own a good deal of property? I couldn't answer, replied Director General King. So again, literally, we didn't think about whether, other countries might reciprocate similar taxes. A lot of Canadians own property in the United States, said MP McLean. If we're going to tax American buyers on their properties in Canada, surely they are going to reciprocate very quickly in taxing Canadians who own property in the United States. That is going to be a tax drain on Canadians. Tell me you've thought about this, please. King replied, I can't speak to that. We seem to get a lot of that these days when it comes to the government and just everything kind of going on, that literally there's always oh yeah, we didn't think about the unintended consequences. We just really thought about how's this going to help me in today's polls. Well, if I say that foreign buyers are the reason that Canadians can't afford real estate, that'll probably get me votes. So I'm going to say that, and we'll implement some policies about that, and we'll worry about the collateral damage later. Literally how all government seems to work. So let's move into a Black Pill story here. This is from the Ron Paul Institute, written by Jeffrey A. Tucker from the Brownstone Institute. Again, I'm a big fan and follower of his writing for quite a while. But essentially what he's talking about here is how the administration, the health officials, and a lot of politicians are still defending lockdowns, despite the fact that at this point in time, we're almost at universal consensus that this is all bullshit. So 15 years ago, writers schooled in computer science began to imagine various totalitarian schemes for pandemic control. Experienced public health officials in 2006 warned that this would lead to disaster. Donald Henderson, for example, went through the whole list of possible restrictions. I encourage you guys to click on the link and actually look at it, shooting them down one by one. Still, a decade and a half later, governments all over the world tried lockdowns anyways. And sure enough, since April of 2020, scholars have observed that these lockdown policies haven't worked. The politicians preached, the cops enforced, citizens shamed each other, and businesses and schools did their best to comply with all the strictures. But the virus kept going with seemingly disregard for all these antics. The evidence is in. Restrictions are not associated with any particular set of virus mitigation goals. 40 studies have shown no connection between the policy, egregious violations of human liberty, and the intended outcomes, diminishing the overall disease impact of the pathogen. Again, there's a link to those studies. I encourage you guys to check it out, as well as check out the entire essay here that Jeffrey put together. But we're going to keep rolling. This is from the Post Millennial. CBC and CTV News journalists target donors to freedom protesters. So I already kind of covered this. I think it's wrong, particularly the angle they're taking in all this. And understand, they're just looking to demonize everyone they can. And unfortunately, I've actually seen a lot of great Canadians on Twitter, in particular, a lot of great Canadian Bitcoiners end up having to take their accounts private. Some of them have been deleting their accounts and essentially launching new accounts. Some are just taking breaks off of Twitter because so much hate is being directed towards them now that they've been doxxed due to this hack, right? And again, I can't help but feel like if the roles were reversed, if we were in a different situation, that CBC and CTV News would not be going after these individuals, right? Certainly, we didn't see that from the Canadian or American mainstream press with Black Lives Matter, right? During 2020 and early 2021, there was no interest in trying to get to the bottom of where all that money was coming from. No one digs deep into George Soros's his playbook and where all his money goes and what that eventually actually leads to in regards to the impact on society. Instead, they just really want to focus on demonizing the individuals that our prime minister has essentially deemed the others. So again, link in the video description down below. Now, this is from Timcast. New studies suggest masking children could be detrimental for development. Not only do masks hinder the ability of children to recognize faces, but they also disrupt the typical holistic way that faces are processed, said the study's senior author. And this is actually a new study from York University here in Canada. So the study analyzed, and it's obviously a small selection here, but the study analyzed 72 children between the ages of 6 to 14 years old on the Cambridge Face Memory Test Kids, a validated measure of face perception performance. Faces were presented with or without masks and across two orientations, upright and inverted. The inclusion of face masks led to a profound deficit in face perception abilities, the study found. This decrement was more pronounced in children compared to adults, but only when task difficulty was adjusted across the two age groups. Additionally, children exhibited reliable correlations between age and the CFMT-K score for upright faces for both masks and no mask conditions. Finally, as previously observed in adults, children also showed qualitative differences in the processing of masked versus non-masked faces. Specifically, holistic processing, a hallmark of face perception, was disrupted for masked faces as suggested by a reduced face inversion effect. So again, link to the full article from Timcast if you guys are interested in checking it out. But next one here, I touched upon this briefly yesterday, but the Moderna CEO sparks departure speculations after he deletes Twitter, sells stock. So I believe it was around $400 million in stock he sold over this period of time. We've also seen some other executives selling as well. The pharmaceutical company has not made a statement about CEO's social media presence. So again, if you guys want to dive deeper into this story, link in the video description down below. But definitely feels a little suspicious in my opinion. All right, looks like I got a spammer in the chat. I'm going to block them quick here, and we'll keep rolling. So this is a big black pill, in my opinion. This is from CTV News, but most of the mainstream media was covering it to some degree. Prince Andrew to settle sex abuse case, donate to charity. So again, remember, there's been a whole host of embarrassments for the royal family at this point in time. I don't even understand why we've got the royal family. I think let's just get rid of them at this point in time. Let's decouple them from Canada. And yeah, I get it. The governor general and stuff will have to tweak some things. But I mean, at this point in time, Trudeau just does whatever Trudeau wants. Anyways, let's at least save us some of the money and embarrassment associated with the royal family. So New York, Prince Andrew, accused in a lawsuit of sexually abusing a 17-year-old girl supplied to him by financier Jeffrey Epstein, has agreed to settle by making a substantial donation to his accuser's charity and declaring he never meant to malign her character, a court filing revealed Tuesday. So it just, I guess before I even get into my opinions and further into this article, I want to say this lady owes society no debts. The fact that she was even willing to stand up and take the sorts of verbal abuse she received in the press and by, royal supporters and things like that over the last, over years and years, maybe it's even been going on for a decade now. She doesn't have to be the poster child for it. But at the same time, we as a society need to start holding these elites more accountable to their actions and their lies, right? Literally, there's been interviews of him saying he never met her, despite the fact there's a photo. Then he said, I don't remember meeting her. Then when there was details came out about the relationship they had, he said, that can't be true because I don't sweat. And if you guys want to see one of the most awkward interviews you've ever seen, because understand, he literally lives in a different reality than most of us, where the idea of him being held accountable for his actions is literally just outside of his understanding. At least that's my humble take. Andrew strenuously denied Gouffre's allegations and attempt to get the lawsuit tossed earlier this year. So again, like throughout this, they were like, oh, this is a frivolous lawsuit. There's no reason we should actually have to proceed. Then when it looked like, oh no, this lawsuit was going to proceed, he was like, no, I'm covered under the settlement Epstein made with her, because Epstein also made an out-of-court settlement with her for $500,000. And again, it's just fascinating to see the narrative here deteriorate, and yet they still try and hold on to some semblance of firm ground here when they've got nothing. According to a statement, Prince Andrew acknowledged that Epstein trafficked countless young girls over many years and said the prince regrets his association with Epstein and commends the bravery of Miss Gouffre and other survivors in standing up for themselves and others. He also pledged to support the victims of sex trafficking as part of demonstrating his regret. And what exact regret was that, Andrew? Stevens estimated that Andrew paid about $10 million to settle, having gotten the cash after selling a ski chalet at a fire sale price. He speculated that the cash would be split into 3 unequal portions. Her lawyers and charities with Gouffre, her lawyers and charities taking a piece each. Andrew repeatedly denied Gouffre's allegations and has said he can't recall ever meeting her, although a photograph of Gouffre and Andrew together in a London townhouse, his arm around her bare midriff, was included in Gouffre's lawsuit against him. The settlement may be a relief to others beyond the prince and Gouffre because of the names that might have arisen at trial. Again, this is the most frustrating part. We saw this with the Maxine Ghislaine trial, right? Where essentially so much of it was kept out of the public realm of knowledge. We literally had the FBI, I believe it was the FBI. Yeah, I think FBI, not CIA, losing stuff. And again, this, if this shit doesn't blackpill you, I don't know what will. I'm right now in the middle. I was looking for my book, but it's over on the couch. But I'm in the middle of reading the Franklin conspiracy. If you guys want to get very blackpilled and understand how long this has been going on in politics and how it seems like there's barely a clean politician amongst all the politicians, I really encourage you to read it. It's dark. It's so fucked up that I don't think you'll believe me until you read it. But I encourage you to do so because I also think being blind to this shit does us no good, right? And I can only imagine that if that was, if that was my mother, if that was my sister, if that was my niece, if that was my daughter, how I'd want this shit to come to light so that those that are guilty can actually be held accountable and serve as an example to others that would consider doing as such. This is from Zero Hedge. Martial law in Canada, it's never been riskier to not own Bitcoin. So yes, I agree with that sentiment. I kind of talked your guys' ears off about Bitcoin yesterday, so I won't do it again. But there is something just interesting about essentially, and I think they've got some good memes in this post, so that's why I also included it. But there's just something interesting about Justin Trudeau, who wears blackface and calls us racist, right? He's also had his own groping allegations, and he calls us misogynist. He's literally been involved in 2 ethics committee scandals. And we had the weird We Charity scandal where essentially they gave over $43 million to We Charity, and his family essentially directly received 1% of that in speaker fees and free travel and things of that nature and comps. And again, it's hard for me to not look at this shit black-pilled and believe that these people literally think they're above us, that they deserve to rule us, that it's their inherent right. So again, link in the video description down below if you guys want to check it out. But let's move on to a couple clown pills here. And this is ridiculous. This is from Louder with Crowder. Officer stops gunman, even checks on him after campus group. It's unjustified state violence. So this is actually a really fucked up situation. I didn't remember the full story until I kind of revamped my understanding by reading the article. So I encourage you guys to do as well. But essentially, a police officer stops a gunman before he actually gets to campus so he can kill lots of people. And when the gunman gets injured, the gunman literally, at one point says, let me bleed out. And the police officer don't want that to happen. We've got emergency response vehicles on the way. He encouraged other cops that showed up there to start implementing first aid until paramedics could arrive. And yet, literally one of the groups on campus said this was government violence. So, but no good deed ever goes unpunished in our demented society. And as the Washington Free Beacon reports, Care Not Cops, a student group, wants the school to defund, disarm, and disband its police department in response to Twardick shooting Wilson. The group argued that it was wrong for anyone to treat the police stopping Wilson before he reached the unarmed student body as a positive outcome. Care Not Cops is a radical organization comprised of idiots who believe police violence endangering the lives of the neighbors, friends, and community is being twisted into a positive outcome. We reject this. We affirm that all state violence is unjustifiable. Police violence is only justifiable under the logic of white supremacy and racial capitalism. I flip-flop these days between whether we live in the black pill timeline, the clown pill timeline, or whether we'll actually be able to build a better society someday. But let's move on from clown pill to a white pill here. So we've actually seen, and there's a bit of an update since this article came out, but we've had 5 different premiers come out and say that they don't want to enact the Emergencies Act. We've had 4 provinces oppose Trudeau's use of Emergencies Act on freedom protesters. And when we got 10 provinces, that feels like a pretty good record overall, in my opinion. The fact that we're seeing 40-50% of provinces speak up or say that they disagree with the implementation of this. Link in the video description down below if you guys want to check it out. And then the other white pill I kind of want to share with you guys today is just, reminding us that there actually are good Canadians out there. It's just almost none of them are politicians. Almost none of them work in the deep states or deep in the administration. Most of them are literally just going about their lives, doing their things and trying to lead by example. And so I want to give a shout out to NVK, who's an amazing Canadian, vocal proponent of Bitcoin and constantly trying to push things forward. He owns the company CoinKite. If you guys are looking to start getting into cold storage or self-custody of your Bitcoins, I think Cold Card is a great option for you to consider. It's also Canadian made. So literally, I just want to highlight this tweet from him because I'm seeing a lot of similar concerns from a lot of, Bitcoin Canada Twitter. In case we go to the gulag, you can find the source code and schematics here. So literally, they've made all their schematics and source code available on GitHub. And the only thing is you can't use it for commercial purposes. But if you need to do it for yourself, you're able to go do it. So again, if you're looking for some great follows in Canadian Bitcoin Twitter, I encourage you to check out NVK. Again, BTC Sessions is absolutely amazing, but he's taking a break from Twitter. And Greg Foss is also a fantastic follow, and there's plenty more that I'm forgetting off the top of my head. But that's it for white pills. Oh, I forgot to clear my labels there. Let's jump into a couple of memes, and then I'll jump into your comments. And again, always appreciate you guys engaging and sharing your opinions. So 4 of 5 citizens love democracy, and it's 4 people beating 1 naked individual. It's important we understand that democracy, particularly with no constraints, is literally just the tyranny of the majority, right? Oftentimes, you'll hear this old analogy that democracy is 2 wolves and a sheep deciding what's for dinner, and a republic, like what the American founding fathers originally intended in regards to the United States, is actually well-armed sheep contesting the vote. And again, that feels no more relevant than today. It's so relevant these days. And then the second one I want to share here, this one's got a lot going on, but the March of Tyranny. And so it's essentially got, the global elites or the Illuminati, whatever you want to call them, the global elite bankers and mainstream media as their propaganda tool, and essentially marching left, right. And it's the Democrats and Republicans, or the blue and red. And so, the blue steps on Democrat and they say, next time I'll vote Republican. And the red steps on a Republican and he says, next time I'll vote Democrat. And it's important we understand that, we need to really start speaking out and standing up. And we need to start demanding more accountability and just better people in general to become politicians. This idea that the parasite class is above us is completely wrong-headed, right? That's not what our ancestors and forefathers intended. And it's definitely not what was intended in America, but it's also not what was intended even when we think about the British Commonwealth, right? Think back to the Magna Carta. One of the few things that they actually taught us, I feel like, in Canadian history that was actually important and relevant. And understand that that was the beginning of really stating that, like, no, hey, just because you're in power doesn't mean that, like, might is right and you just will be able to dominate and be a tyrant over us regardless. Like, we actually need to have this be a two-way street. And over time, individuals continued to fight and essentially establish their individual sovereignty, their freedoms, their right to self-government, and essentially being able to choose their own path in life. And we're at a precipice moment right now. We're at a fork in the road. And if we're not careful, we're going to see a repeat of history. And I don't want it, guys. I don't want it for me. I don't want it for future generations. And sure as fuck, you guys shouldn't want it for each other either. But let's jump into the comment section. Again, appreciate all of you engaging with it. So we've got Elizabeth, we've got Element Boy, Aislinn, we've got Kyle O'Connor. If you don't pay your $1.05, who will? If you don't pay your $1.05, who will? That must have been a reference to something earlier that I forgot. But again, appreciate you jumping in, Kyle. We got Elizabeth. Wait, my bank account may be frozen for watching Maple Pill. We're not too far away from that. And so again, if this isn't an orange pill moment for you, I'm not sure what's going to convince you to start learning about Bitcoin, guys. So again, I plan on doing a special episode. It'll probably be a while before I put it together because I want to, really make it dense with information, but we'll do a special episode of the Maple Pill. Maybe we'll do it as a live event like we did with BTC or SOS BTC that I did last year, which was a free Bitcoin conference we did online. I'd like to do something like that again this year and maybe take it just a little bit more advanced because I think we should all start really learning about how to get away from KYC Bitcoin. We've got Basmatic. Do you think the woman merits or the woman Métis leader is indeed compromised? I'm not sure what that's in reference to, Basmatic, so I can't comment. Is that one of the leaders of the Freedom Convoy? I've got no idea. What I will say is that I imagine she never thought it was going to grow to this level, probably never gained this momentum, probably never even gained this sort of controversy around it. And, I give a much larger benefit of the doubt and grain of salt to honest individual citizens that step up when they hear a calling versus individuals that, have wanted to be politicians for extended periods of time, that have, ingrained themselves in the elite class or surrounded themselves with bankers and high finance individuals. So I don't really know, and I'd hate to spread rumors here. Peter says, if Trump or Putin froze investors' bank accounts, people would lose their minds. Yes, that's a very fair comparison in my mind. And you are 100% correct in that sentiment that, like, literally, if we saw Putin freeze, like, the bank accounts of Russian citizens or, Ukrainian nationals that lived in Russia or anything like that, we'd probably use that as an excuse to go to war at this stage because NATO and the American administration are literally just salivating at the idea of a war in the Ukraine for some reason. Peter says, it's asinine that we are at this point. 100% agree. Aislinn, we need a black pill special. Yeah, I like to try and keep it a little bit balanced, but I kind of feel like almost every episode's a black pill special these days. Brock McPherson, did you see the video of the OPP in Peterborough going to a resident house who was participating in a Convoy Facebook group? Yes, that was very concerning. Almost to the point where, like, it felt like it had to have been staged, but I don't believe it was. So if you guys missed it, it was making the rounds on social media this weekend, I believe. And essentially, it was a Peterborough OPP officer showing up to an individual citizen's home and saying, hey, we saw that you're a participant in this Facebook group. We wanted to give you like a brochure or a handout on your rights as a protester. Now, if you want to give the government the benefit of the doubt and you want to be blue pill, you'll just be like, they're just trying to make sure that people don't, cross a line and they don't break the law accidentally and yada, 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 yada. But if you're black pilled, you'd want to view that as an intimidation of the state. Hey, we know what you're up to. Don't even fucking think about it. And while, I saw some pundits and commenters saying like, oh, but, it was a nice, young, smiling female OPP officer. She's not threatening in any way. No, the state is always threatening in every way. Literally, the state, their whole premise is we've got a monopoly on violence and we're not afraid to use it. And again, that violence doesn't always have to be physical violence. It could be them shutting down your bank accounts, them freezing your shit. And understand that a bank, being given the benefit of the doubt on freezing your assets, that can destroy a small business. That can destroy a large business. And again, even if they unfreeze it down the line, the damage is done for a lot of small businesses, right? This is completely unacceptable that we find ourselves at this moment in time. I think it's gross that the Peterborough OPP were out doing that. Maybe instead they should have been guarding that vehicle with 2,000 firearms in it that got stolen. But that's just my hot take. Project LB52, a reminder, guys, if you want to check out the NFT project I'm involved, there's a link in the video description down below. Hey, what's up, Alan? Appreciate the happy birthday. We got Abdul in the chat. We got Brandon Miller, Rise Above Health. Case in point, why career politicians should not be allowed. Yeah, 100% agree. Definitely having a term limits and things of that nature is important. I don't want a political class. I literally want citizens that occasionally act as politicians rather than politicians that almost never act as citizens. Okay, a bunch of spam. What else we got? Election season on the rise. Yeah, election season's on the horizon. So we can see some politicians finally starting to, act a little bit nicer to us. Terabella, hey, Matt, I'd love to hear your thoughts on where someone should store their money if they remove it from the bank. Obviously, we don't want to put it all into Bitcoin, and some people don't yet have a good nest egg saved up. So where else would you recommend people to store their money who want to get it out of the banks but still have access to it? A house or apartment can be robbed or burned down, and we don't want it in the hands of tyrants or people who the tyrants can control. Yeah, it's a great question. If you're going to have fiat currency and you don't want it stored in a bank, honestly, you're going to be relatively restricted to your options, and none of them are going to be ideal, right? So if you wanted to, if you go to certain gold buyers or sellers of gold, large, really large jewelers and stuff like that, they'll sometimes have private safety deposit boxes where you can literally have a safety deposit box that's in their vault or in their secure facility. Some of them will have 24-hour guards and stuff like that. But I understand when push comes to shove, those individuals would still cave to the state and still give the state access to your safety deposit box. So that's maybe if we're literally comparing things, it's maybe one step better than a safety deposit box in a bank, but not really. Obviously, there's the old, I grew up on a farm, and you constantly hear about old farmers that would dig random fence post holes and put a jar with money in the bottom of it. That's definitely not ideal for a multitude of reasons as well. If you die, who else is going to know where it is or get access to it? And if you tell someone else, well, they could access it before you die. And then there's also the risk that, hey, just inflation's making your money worth less and less, right? Literally, we're at 6-7% inflation as the states. However, I'd argue we're probably closer to 10% or better at this point in time. That means your money, if we take it at 10%, it's literally losing 10% every year. So if you leave it buried in a hole in your backyard for 1 year, you're now all of a sudden going to have, essentially the equivalent of $90 if you buried $100 in purchasing power. So that's definitely not ideal. I think that I don't think that I'm going to be able to give a good solution for people if you want to pull it out of the banks. I think that having some fiat on hand is always just wise, right? So having some easy to access cash in case you were to have your accounts frozen for a short period of time, at least be able to, get over that hump. If you're more prepper oriented, you could start investing it into supplies or tools or things of that nature that you think will maintain their value, right? Or potentially keep up with inflation. You could look at things like hard currency, like gold or silver, like precious metals. But again, where do you store those and how do you keep it safe from thieves and things of that nature? I will tell you guys, don't don't do what like basic people do, which is like they try and be slightly smart, and they're like, well, instead of like, you know, putting my money in my having it sit out like on my desk, I'll put it in the freezer, I'll put it in my lingerie drawer, I'll put it in this, that, like all the basic shit that you're thinking about. Any thief worth their salt, any B&E specialist will have already had a basic understanding of that. There are a host of great books on, you know, extreme privacy and things of that nature. Maybe I can do a special on that and highlight some resources that you guys can go study. But again, I wouldn't want to use that as a 100% gospel or like the only template I'd follow. I'd use that more as inspiration rather than a direct like step-by-step mandate. So probably not as helpful as you'd like, Tara, but there we are. Peter says, Gadsad discusses all this about political correctness, destroying society and the parasitic mind. Yeah, and I saw him. He was tweeting out a storm since the Emergencies Act. He literally was like tweeting to Ron DeSantis. He was like, we're going to be at the same event this weekend. Any chance that you can just hand me my American citizenship then? It's clear that Canada doesn't want me. And obviously a little bit of that is playing up to the politics of our time. But sadly, there's a lot more truth to that than I think we realize. Liberal Fascism is also a great book on this as well. Okay, cool. I'll definitely check that out. Appreciate it, Peter. Cynical Theories too. And now I'm officially on a government list. Yep, bank account is locked now. Laugh my ass off, says Abdul. Abdul says, agreed. Get rid of that monarchy. It's so useless now and just a waste of money in general. And like, to be honest, this feels like one thing where, you know, me and the left should be able to agree. Hey, we don't want some old white lady that just through birth has the privilege of controlling our country. Let's get rid of her. Like, hey, that's one time that I'm willing to check all the white privilege in the world with the monarchy. Maybe we can come to terms with that. Maybe that's how the great compromise occurs. Can someone break down the pills? Yeah, so Mr. Pipton, if you're not familiar with it, essentially, originally there was this term called, being red-pilled. And that comes from the Matrix, and that's where Neo is faced with a choice from, I'm forgetting his name now, but Morpheus. And Morpheus says, you can take the blue pill, you'll wake up in your bed, and this will all just seem like a dream, or you can take the red pill and see how far down the rabbit hole goes. Well, as time has gone on, political pundits started using the red pill as like, oh, you're starting to not trust the government. You're starting to question their narrative. Maybe you think 9/11 was an inside job. Maybe you think Kennedy wasn't assassinated by who we were told he was. Maybe you think, like things like the Bay of Pigs or the Tuskegee experiments, or looking at like the Northwoods, Operation Northwoods. And you start to learn all these things and you're like, holy shit, like it turns out the government does a lot of nefarious things all the time. You start to really question their intentions and whether the government's actually good people or whether they're bought and paid for. But then it turns out that there's more conspiracies out there, and we essentially need to start, delineating from the red pill. So like we've got the blue pill, which means you believe the mainstream press and just whatever they say. And that's kind of what I try and cover in the blue pill stories. Then we've got the red pill, and the red pill is all about like starting to question the narrative, starting to see the cracks in the facade from politicians and the administration. Black pill is like, they're maybe not quite to this extreme, but almost like they're lizard people. They're literally sacrificing children. And like, I don't want you guys to think I'm crazy, but I don't think it's crazy to start to think about that stuff. The more research you go down, the more rabbit holes. Literally read the Franklin cover-up, right? Or is it the Franklin cover-up or the Franklin controversies? Or I'll share the book with you guys in the future. But essentially the black pill is like, holy fuck, like everyone's corrupt, everyone's a pedophile, everyone's making human sacrifices, like the government's completely bought and paid for, we don't even live in a democracy, And then the clown pill is like, yeah, that stuff's all true. But like, also look at how stupid they are. These people literally control the world, and yet like they still get their hand slapped for the hand in the cookie jar type thing. And, Trudeau calls us racist while he's blackface. Right? He's been blackface more times than he can remember because we keep having more controversies where people discover more versions of him wearing blackface. And then finally, we've got the white pill. And the white pill is about like, hey, all that stuff may be true. Maybe some of it's not true. But look, I'm in control of my life. I've got individual sovereignty. I'm going to focus on doing me, making sure that me and mine, as I define it, are taken care of. So that's all about, to me, like the white pill is giving the biggest middle finger to the administration, to the government, to the corporate bankers, to the multinational corporations, essentially being like, I'm going to have a family. I'm going to get connected to my food. I'm going to have strong social bonds with people that live around me. I'm going to act as if a sovereign individual. So if I believe that the government enacts mask mandates and I don't think they're justified, I'm not going to wear a mask. And if someone wants to, judge me, if they want to belittle me, if they want to whatever, I'm a free man. I'm going to stand behind my decisions. And so that to me is really what the white pill's about. Also, like the white pill to me is also about Bitcoin, but technically there's the orange pill, which is all about just being orange pilled. And then we've got other things like, specific conspiracies will have their own terms, like the AIDS pill. And as I've mentioned previously, I'm starting to become a little bit AIDS pilled. I haven't done enough research to say that I'm 100% AIDS pilled, but dig into that shit. Dig into Fauci's bast. Dig into, what was that drug? AZT. And look at how many people died of that and how many people that didn't take it didn't die. There's a handful of different books I could recommend as well. But again, all this shit's going to get me on a list. I'm already on lists. But anyways, so again, it's essentially just a way of trying to quickly create common knowledge amongst people, being like, I'm red pilled, I'm black pilled, I'm white pilled. And the goal of the maple pill for me is they say, a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down easier. So what I'm trying to do in essence is try and help you guys on your journey, regardless of where you're at. So if you're blue pilled, hey, I'm going to try and ease you in with a couple blue pill stories first, and then expose you to some of the other perspectives out there. If you're black pilled, I'm going to try and keep helping guide you through that until you hit white pill, because it's truly a lonely journey for most people when they start to really understand that, like, the world that you were raised to believe in isn't the way that it was explained to you by your grade 3 teacher, isn't the way that you were explained in university. And likely, honestly, your parents probably don't fully understand the extent, because the internet has created a mass awakening amongst people, not a mass wokening, a mass awakening. And I have hope for future generations that as long as we continue to fight for freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of association, all those wonderful freedoms, that there is a good chance that we'll see better days on the horizon, but they're not guaranteed to us. And that to me is why I'm trying to do the maple pill, why I've put together this show. So appreciate you asking that question, Mr. Pipton, and hopefully that helps. Jennifer says they are trying to protect Clinton. I wonder why they settled. Yeah, and like we don't have time to get into the is it the Mueller investigation or whatever with Clinton, and like they were literally spying on the president of the United States. The whole Russia issue, right, with Trump. It turns out that seems to be an entire fabrication almost. And I'm saying almost so I don't get banned off of YouTube of Clinton and the FBI and things of that nature. It's like that shit will red pill you as well, or maybe black pill you. It's wild how comfortable these people are just lying. And all I want is truth, authenticity, and honesty from our politicians, right? Tell it like it is. I'm an adult. I'm a big boy. I can make my own decisions. But if you're lying to me about every goddamn fact, if you're misleading me about everything, understand, I'm going to start to get mad about that. And I think that we've seen some of those frustrations boil over in regards to the Freedom Convoy, not just here in Canada, but why it's popped up and spread across the globe. This isn't some Russia conspiracy. This is honestly a lot of citizens understanding their governments have done fucked up things since the beginning of governments. And why would we all of a sudden believe that governments are good today? What's changed, right? And this is the sort of thing where, like, when people talk about being red-pilled or black-pilled, most people will admit that at least at some point in time, the CIA did really bad things. Okay, well, did any of those people get charged? Were any new rules or regulations or oversights really put in place over the CIA? Or with time, have we given them more and broader powers? Have we only increased their budgets? Oh, yeah. So why would I believe the CIA is good today if they were bad in the past, and essentially the same people that were present when they were bad in the past are also pulling the strings today? So yeah. Delexon says, what's your prediction on the primary residence tax and when it will be applied and the overall impact on the tax? I'm constantly just looking on the horizon to see it come. Recently, they just announced again that they've got zero intentions. Literally, I think today or yesterday, they announced they've got zero intentions of taxing principal residences in Canada or the equity Canadians have in their principal residence. I still don't believe them, because why are they tracking that data? Why do they have the CMHC doing some of the studies the CMHC is doing in regards to how much money could be earned based upon those taxes? Yeah. All right. Anyways, guys, I'm going to wrap up because I got on some pretty big tangents tonight. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, consider smashing that like button. Hit subscribe if you're new to the channel. If you hate watching this on big tech, I don't blame you. I do post the replays of this on BitChute and Rumble, usually about 1 or 2 hours after we get done with the recording, because it takes a while to download and upload and do all that jazz. But again, really appreciate you guys. Those of you that are sharing this on social media, those of you that are participating in the Problems or Profits Discord, link in the video description down below, especially if you're sharing stories in the Maple Pill. I really do appreciate that, and appreciate your insights and your sources as well. And I guess what I want to leave you with is understand that no matter where you are on the pill journey, no matter how dark it seems, you're not alone. There's other good Canadians out there that are also willing to stand up and speak out for their individual rights and freedoms as well as yours. And we all just need to band together and let the politicians know that this is unacceptable. Because again, progress is being made. Whether we want to fully trust it or not, I'm not fully trusting it yet. But once we can verify that they actually do open things up again, understand that the only reason that happened, and the only reason it happened on this timeline, is because so many Canadians participated in the Freedom Convoy. And again, I've never been prouder to be a Canadian than when I look at the Freedom Convoy. These last 3 weeks have literally been the greatest white pill I could ask for. So I really appreciate everyone that's doing that. I appreciate everyone that's going to continue to support them to the extent that they feel appropriate, regardless of what the government says. Thank you, guys, and I'll see you in the next video. Same time, same place, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'll see you tomorrow.